Hello there. Are you here to drop off an article?
No, actually, I'm a private investigator. The name's Miles Fordham.
How exciting. You must have so many interesting stories.
You could say that, yes.
Please, come in, come in. I'm Alan Brentwell, owner and publisher of Brentwell Magazine.
Pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Confessions of a Steam Addict by Ezra Bartley. I think I'm better off not knowing. For Whom the Bell Almost Tolled by Suki Snobs. Fascinating stuff. For the publisher of a sensationalist rag, Brentwell is awfully well read. Assuming he actually has read all those books, of course. Empty. Too bad. I can only begin to imagine how many lurid and salacious articles are kept in those cabinets. I can only begin to imagine how many lurid... Brentwell has a front row seat to all the horrible things he might want to write about in his magazine.
I have some questions for you, Mr. Brentwell.
Wonderful! It's so seldom I get to answer questions.
What can you tell me about Desiree Lathan?
Desiree Lathan. Oh, why, she came to me a few weeks ago in response to an ad I took out requesting articles. She told me she had an idea readers would love. We agreed on 10 crowns per paragraph, and she was on her way. Come to think of it, I haven't heard from her in a few days.
Were you aware that Miss Lathan is dead?
What? No, I had no idea. What happened?
I'm not exactly sure. She seems to have burned to death under mysterious circumstances.
Mysterious circumstances?
Most of her body was burnt to ash, but there's very little fire damage around her. It's as though she herself just caught fire.
Oh, that sounds positively ghastly. Oh dear.
Is something wrong?
I just remembered. The article she was writing, dear God, I hope she didn't go too far with her research.
Tell me about Brentwell Magazine.
We're a monthly publication focusing on both fiction and non-fiction pieces.
Ah, yes, you're publishing that serial, aren't you? The Dissembling Mechanism?
You're a subscriber! Tell me, what did you think of the conclusion? Quite astonishing, wasn't it?
I haven't had a chance to read it yet, I'm afraid.
Ah, then I won't say any more about it. My dream was to have a magazine that was well-respected and educational. But sadly, it seems today's audiences are much more interested in reading about sightings of giant bat creatures or mysterious buried treasures. Such a pity.
I hear you have a bit of a reputation for making your reporters do questionable things for their articles.
You are mistaken, Mr. Fordham. I don't force my writers to do anything. They seem to have this notion that the more extreme their research, the more authentic the articles will be.
What sort of extremes are we talking about here?
We had one writer who attempted to heighten the sensation of fear she wanted to express in her story. Damn near decapitated herself by sticking her head through an opening at the clock tower at St. Denis Cathedral. Ugh. Thankfully, she made it out alive. It would have been quite the predicament if she hadn't. Especially considering that was our most popular article last year. Oh, people have such odd taste.
What made you decide to start this business?
I always wanted to be a journalist. I never had much luck with any of the local papers, though. So I decided to start my own. I admit it's not exactly what I wanted, but I like to think Brentwell Magazine has found its own unique voice.
Voice? More like a gurgling scream.
What exactly was Desiree's article about?
I'm not entirely sure. She merely came to me with the proposal.
She didn't tell you what that idea was?
She did, but I wasn't sure what to make of it.
Please, Mr. Brentwell, stop stalling and tell me what she was writing about.
It was about spontaneous human combustion.
What do you know about spontaneous human combustion?
That's the thing. I don't know very much at all. It sounded interesting enough. That's why I accepted Miss Lathan's proposal to write the article about it.
But what do you know about it?
Only that it's a mysterious phenomenon in which a person catches fire spontaneously and burns to death. It sounds exactly as you described Miss Lathan's condition.
Do you know what Miss Lathan's research on the subject involved?
Only the one contact I gave her, a Miss Angela Maxwell at the Spectre Society in Gascone.
The Spectre Society, huh? I shouldn't be surprised to hear that name again.
Are you a member?
Actually, I am.
Then I suggest you do some research there. There's bound to be something relevant in that curious library of theirs.
Thank you. Perhaps I will. Thanks for your time, Mr. Brentwell.
The pleasure is all mine.
Welcome back, Mr. Fordham.
Could I ask you about some things, Miss Maxwell?
Certainly, darling.
Are you familiar with a woman named Desiree Lathan?
Yes, she came to see me just last week. She told me she was doing research for an article she was writing for Brentwell magazine.
What sort of research?
She asked me a few questions and looked at my books. That was all. She wasn't here for very long.
And what was she researching?
Something about spontaneous human combustion, I believe.
Did you know that Desiree Lathan is dead?
What? My God, no! I didn't. What happened to her?
She was found burned to death in her bed.
How awful.
You have any idea how this may have happened?
There are a number of possibilities, but if she was in the middle of researching spontaneous human combustion, and then to have this happen, it can't be a coincidence.
Are you suggesting she herself was a victim of spontaneous combustion?
One need only compare the circumstances of her death with the facts, darling.
She can't be serious, can she?
What can you tell me about spontaneous human combustion?
I'm not overly familiar with the subject, but I do have a book about it on the shelf back there. You are welcome to look at it if it will help.
I may, but I'd like to know what your understanding of it is.
Well, I believe it is when the human body inexplicably catches fire and burns. It usually occurs among elderly women who drink to excess, and very little fire damage is caused around the body. That's really all I know, darling. It's not a very agreeable subject for study now, is it?
Thank you for the information. It was very enlightening.
It was my pleasure, darling.
This all sounds strangely familiar, but spontaneous human combustion can't be real, can it? Then again, sometimes the simplest explanation is the correct one.
I'll be going now.
May the spirits guide you to that which you seek.
Miss Robineau?
Oh, it's you again. Have you come to ask me more questions?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind.
No. Be my guest.
Is the name Peter Andrews familiar to you?
Peter Andrews? Is he still around?
I'd be able to tell you that if you told me who he is.
He's desperate. That's who he is. A lovesick fool who is obsessed with Desi. Sent her love letters all of the time.
Well, you know where I can find him.
Why would you want to?
Because I want to question him about Miss Lathan's death.
I suppose that makes some sense. All I remember Desi telling me is that he worked at the Bank of Vespuccia, a clerk or some such. Imagine.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thanks for your time. I'll let you get back to your drink.
Thanks, sweetheart.
Mr. Fordham.
Ah, Mr. Dupre. Good to see you again. Is all well with you?
Absolutely. Everything is wonderful. Because of you, the city has finally seen Laura Dupre for the monster she is. I cannot thank you enough.
I suppose you're welcome?
Now then, is there anything I can help you with?
Yes, I'm looking for Peter Andrews. I was told he worked here.
That's right. His desk is just over there.
Thank you, Mr. Dupre. Lovely seeing you.
I tried using one of these automatic money dispensers once, but I nearly got my arm stuck inside. They still got a long way to go. Yeah, impressive bit of hardware. It would take a criminal mastermind to rob this bank. What an absurd contraption. Imagine needing all those extra bits and bobs just to tell the time.
Mr. Andrews.
Yes?
Miles Fordham, private investigator. May I ask you a few questions?
Yes, I suppose that would be fine. Have a seat.
I'd rather stand, if it's all the same to you. Now then. Do you know Desiree Lathan?
Desiree Lathan? No, I can't say the name rings any bells.
You say you don't know Miss Lathan. Would you care to explain these?
Why are they crumpled up? Did she throw them out? And why do you have them?
I just love catching people like this.
Relax, Mr. Andrews. Let's take this slowly. Now, I can assume by your reaction that these are your letters?
Yes, they are.
So why did you lie about knowing Miss Lathan?
I promised my wife I would cut off contact.
But you clearly didn't. The most recent letter is from 2 weeks ago.
Did she hire you?
Your wife? No, that's not why I'm here.
Ah, well, that's somewhat of a relief then.
Were you aware of Miss Lathan's death?
What? Desiree is dead? No.
She was found burned to death in her bed.
You're lying. You have to be.
I'm afraid I'm not, Mr. Andrews.
Oh, Desiree.
Do you have any idea who might have wanted to kill her?
No, she was a marvelous woman.
Well, I'm sorry to have to be the bearer of bad news, but at least you won't have to worry about writing any more letters.
That isn't funny, Mr. Fordham.
Yes, it was. Don't listen to him.
So your wife knows about your correspondence with Miss Lathan?
Well, I don't know if you could really call it correspondence. Desiree never wrote back. But yes, Peggy, that is to say Margaret found out shortly after we married.
Exactly how many letters did this bounder send, I wonder?
At first I tried to make it out that she was just a friend, but she found one of the more intimate ones while I was writing it.
I see. And what was her reaction?
What do you think? I still have the scar from the glass that she threw at me.
You're still married?
Oh yes. Margaret comes from a very strict Catholic family. They would sooner she die than divorce. It hasn't been easy. She makes sure to take full advantage of the situation. Always buying herself the most expensive jewelry and spending a fortune on food for those wretched cats. I swear, they're better fed than I am.
Where might I find Mrs. Andrews? I'd like to speak to her.
Our house is at 713 Longfellow Street, just at the edge of Gascon. But I warn you, it's a goddamn menagerie she's got. I'd stay away if you're averse to being covered in animal hair.
I'll take my chances. Exactly what is your role here at the bank?
I'm the manager. I handle the new accounts, organize finance, that sort of thing.
Have you been here long?
Coming up on 17 years. Is this at all relevant to your investigation?
Anything could be, Mr. Andrews. Thanks for your time, Mr. Andrews.
Nice house. It definitely screams, eccentric person lives here. Speaking of which, that must be Mrs. Andrews over there with those rodents. Rats with fluffy tails. How anyone can find them endearing is beyond me.
Excuse me, Mrs. Andrews?
May I help you?
I'm Miles Fordham, private investigator. I was hoping you could answer a few questions.
All right then. Don't worry, my darlings. Mommy only needs a moment to speak to the nice man, then I'll give you all the nuts you can eat. My little friends just adore nuts, Mr. Fordham.
Guess that explains why squirrels are so attracted to her.
Did you know Desiree Lathan?
Not personally. I never met her, but I knew exactly who she was.
And who was that?
A miserable drunk. Always going out and getting liquored up at her so-called socialite balls. They try to make them seem so fancy and high class, but it's really just a bunch of bitter old hags getting together to gossip about each other. With that kind of lifestyle, it was only a matter of time before I caught up with her.
Do you happen to know anything about the circumstances surrounding the death of Miss Lathan?
I read in the paper that she was burned to death. In her bed, wasn't it?
That's right. Do you have any idea how that may have happened?
Well, I already told you she was a drunk. Maybe she came home plastered and decided to smoke in bed. I'm rather surprised she was sleeping alone. That woman got around, if you know what I mean.
She certainly seems to know a lot about Desiree for someone who claims to have never met her.
Do you have any hobbies or pastimes, Mrs. Andrews?
Well, of course. I do a bit of knitting and I take care of my pets.
I take it you're fond of animals?
Oh, yes. I just love animals. Most prove to be better company than people.
Is that right?
Well, consider this, Mr. Fordham. Animals can't betray you or lie.
Uh-oh, I don't like where this is going.
My furry little companions would never hurt me, unlike several humans I could name.
Who are these companions, exactly?
Why, my darling little kitties and squirrel friends, of course.
Tell me about your cats.
They're the most wonderful little dears. Do you have any pets?
Afraid not. My wife isn't too fond of cleaning up after animals.
Pity. Cats make wonderful pets. They're good company and are independent, unlike dogs. Edgar and Hubert are my pride and joy. I give them only the best of everything, and they in turn give me their unconditional love.
That's delightful.
I used to have a wonderful cat named Tobias, but, he had an unfortunate accident. That's why I never let my two angels out of the house.
What happened to Tobias the cat?
I really rather not talk about that. It wasn't my finest hour. Let's just say it was an honest misunderstanding which got blown way out of proportion.
Well, now I just have to know what happened. I hate it when people tease gossip and don't deliver.
Your squirrel friends are quite tame.
Oh, aren't they just the sweetest? And so smart, too. When I feed them, they come up and put their little paws on my hands as though they were giving me little squirrel hugs. And the way they look into my eyes, I can almost hear them saying, "Thank you for the nuts."
Well, at least you can be grateful that it's only my voice you hear and not some rabid squirrels.
Thank you for the chat. It was very enlightening.
Oh, my pleasure, Mr. Fordham. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to tending to my little darlings.
Got a moment, Upton?
Yes, but let's make this quick.
Have a moment to go over my current case?
I'm afraid you're on your own this time, Fordham. The walls have ears around here. If they find out I'm helping you, it won't end well for either of us.
Understood.
I'll still be here when you've solved it, though.
That's it for now.
Better get back to it, then.
Pardon me, Edwards.
Yes?
Have you had a chance to look at those ashes I gave you?
Yes, I have. Unfortunately, there isn't much I can tell you. The victim burned to death at a very high temperature. These ashes are greasy and putrid because of liquefied fat from the body, which burned like a candle. As to what caused her to burn, I cannot say without more evidence. I'm sorry, Miles.
It's quite all right, Edwards. I appreciate the information nonetheless.
Well, just so you don't go away empty-handed, have a copy of my report. Maybe it will be of some use.
Thanks. That's all I needed to know for the moment.
Anytime, Fordham.
Begging your pardon, sir.
Yes?
Perhaps Mr. Usher will see me when he sees this.
Oh, what's that?
A report from Dr. Malcolm Edwards, the city coroner, confirming Miss Lathan's untimely demise.
Let me see that. Oh my. Wait one moment, would you?
Martin, what is the meaning of this?
The gentleman who brought that is a private investigator. He's waiting outside to see you.
Send him in, then.
You heard him, Mr. Fordham. You may go inside and see Mr. Usher.
Thank you kindly.
So, a private investigator, are you?
That's right. Miles Fordham is my name.
Jonas Usher, a pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Pleasure's all mine.
So, it would seem that Miss Lathan has shuffled off the mortal coil, as it were.
I'm sorry to say that is indeed the case.
Please come in, have a seat, make yourself comfortable. I only ask that you kindly wash your hands in the basin first, and limit what you touch in here.
This one seems a bit on edge, doesn't he?
Thank you, Mr. Fordham. I appreciate your cooperation.
Adds a nice bit of color to the room. Is there anything more boring than books on law? Just reading the titles is making me drowsy. Stern-looking lady. Judging by how full these bottles are, Usher doesn't indulge much. What a waste. Usher seems to like keeping his guests at a distance.
Mr. Usher, I have some questions for you.
And hopefully I have your answers.
What can you tell me about Desiree Lathan?
She was a lovely woman. I'm saddened to hear of her unfortunate passing.
How long had you been her attorney?
She retained me some 10 years ago, I believe.
That's quite a long time.
Yes, I remember I had just gotten over a bout of melancholia and been able to work in nearly a month. I didn't think I'd make it out of that, but luckily things took a turn for the better. Miss Lathan came to see me, and I've served as her attorney ever since.
Would you say Miss Lathan is a wealthy woman?
Indeed I would. Her estate is worth a significant sum. Of course, you understand that this is confidential information, so I cannot tell you the exact amount.
Yes, of course. Can you think of anyone who may have wanted to harm Miss Lathan?
No, I can't. What makes you think that someone actually killed her?
It seems the most plausible explanation.
Miss Lathan was getting on in years. It's likely she may have developed a case of pneumonia. That's the most common killer of the elderly, you know. I had it when I was younger. Most unpleasant. Constant coughing, spitting up phlegm, rattling in the lungs. Thankfully, I made a full recovery.
But supposing that was the cause of death, how would it explain the fact that her body was completely burned?
She was a smoker. Perhaps she was having a cigarette when she died and dropped it on the bed, causing it to catch fire.
I found no cigarette butts at the crime scene.
I'm merely offering my opinion, Mr. Fordham. You can take it or leave it.
I think we should leave it.
I found this letter in Miss Lathan's bedroom, which mentions that she recently changed her will. Could you tell me a bit more about the circumstances surrounding this change?
That's not an uncommon occurrence. People change their wills all the time. Relatives and friends fall in and out of favor constantly.
Had Miss Lathan made changes to her will previously?
No, this was the first time.
What change did she make exactly?
Just a change to her beneficiary. Nothing out of the ordinary.
And when did this change occur?
About 4 months ago, if I recall correctly. Yes, it was definitely in June, because I'd been in bed with a nasty stomach flu at the end of May. That was no fun, let me tell you. I think I lost nearly 6 pounds from the constant trips to the WC. Couldn't keep a thing down, and whatever did stay down soon came out the other end, if you get my meaning.
I'd say his meaning is regrettably impossible to avoid.
Who did Miss Lathan name as her new beneficiary?
Mr. Fordham, please! You know I couldn't possibly tell you that. There is such a thing as attorney-client privilege.
I'm aware of that. However, Miss Lathan is deceased. Therefore, it stands to reason that she is in fact no longer your client.
True, but her estate is still in my hands. I'm not going to betray her trust just because she's dead.
About Miss Lathan's beneficiary.
I told you, Mr. Fordham. I can't divulge information protected under attorney-client privilege.
Do you not find it suspicious, Mr. Usher, that Miss Lathan died under such mysterious circumstances only 4 months after naming a new beneficiary? You said yourself she was wealthy. Does it not make sense that someone might have wanted her inheritance?
I suppose it's not entirely out of the question.
Right. So tell me the name of Miss Lathan's beneficiary so I can determine if this was, in fact, a murder.
Very well. It was a man named Roger DeVay.
Do you have any information on where I can find him?
Only his address. It's 775 Pumblechook Place in Chumley.
That'll do nicely. Thank you, Mr. Usher. How long have you been practicing law, Mr. Usher?
Usher and Price has been operating since 1805. I took over from my father 15 years ago. The stress hasn't helped my heartburn, I can tell you that. Why, just last night I was tossing and turning because I couldn't stand the burning in my throat. That's why I've got these bags under my eyes, you know.
Ah, yes. And Mr. Price?
He's still here, although I think he'll probably be retiring soon as well. But the law firm has done well over the years, and I have a feeling it'll do even better in the years to come.
Oh? Why is that?
We're currently beginning a group litigation against Royal Maverick for the Lygia disaster. I'm confident that we'll recover quite a significant sum for the families of those killed. You weren't by chance affected by the disaster, were you?
Thankfully, I wasn't, no.
Shame. You could have joined the class action and done quite well when we win.
You know, I always thought we detectives made our living off human tragedy.
Mr. Usher, I've noticed from your rules and habits that you seem to have a particular aversion to germs. Why is that, if I may ask?
I've been ill most of my life, Mr. Fordham. I was a sickly child, and unfortunately my condition hasn't improved with age. It's a miracle I'm still alive. That's why I'm so careful about exposing myself to germs.
I see.
How's my color? Do I look pale to you?
Not particularly.
I saw myself in the mirror this morning and thought I looked a bit peaked. Also, my leg has been hurting more than usual, which has been cause for concern.
Now you've really done it, Miles.
Yes, well, moving on. Thank you for your help, Mr. Usher.
The pleasure is all mine, Mr. Fordham.
Did Usher give us the wrong address? This should be 775, but there's no building here. These aren't in such bad shape, really. As far as the chum goes, this is one of the nicer areas. Hey, that's just like the one we had when I was a boy. Good old Rusty. He served us well. Yeah, those aren't half bad. Too bad they aren't finished. I wonder if they're going to be used to keep the fire going. I used to draw funny pictures of rich people on walls too when I was a kid. Never did a lick of good, but it would always make me feel better. Doesn't look like much, but I bet it keeps the rain off. Assuming there's no wind.
Excuse me.
Yeah?
Is this 775 Pumblechook Place?
Yeah, it would be if the building were still here.
Oh, I see. Might I ask you a few questions?
You can ask.
Do you know Roger DeVay?
Know him? Of course I know him. He lives here with me.
He does?
Well, whenever he decides to come home, anyway. Rest of the time, I suspect he finds a way to sleep at his job. Me, I'd do the same, except I can't stand the smell of the horses.
Do you know where Mr. DeVay works?
Nah, he never told me.
What's your name, sir?
Me? I'm Herman. Herman Shaw.
How long have you been living here?
Oh, I've been here for ages. Since before the building got condemned and was torn down. They pretty much forced us out, you see, but a couple of us came back and set up here. Seemed like a good idea, and I had nowhere else to go. That's not so bad, except for when it rains. And I guess we'll have to bundle up a bit more when it gets cold. But other than that, it's like the place was still standing.
There's some of that classic chum ingenuity. Or maybe it's just delusion.
Do you know a woman named Desiree Lathan?
Nah, I don't know many women. They're not too fond of my company. Well, I don't understand why. I always try to be a perfect gentleman. Guess it just don't got the charm. I've asked Roger to give me a few pointers. He's a big hit with ladies, you know.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. He no sooner looks at 'em than they're falling at his feet. Real natural, that one. Never brings it back here, though. Always winds up staying with him, getting a free meal and a soft bed out of it. Ah, well, the bohemian lifestyle ain't for everyone. Maybe someday my luck will change.
I'm sure it will change the day he decides to take a bath.
What happened to this place? Why was it condemned?
The building was old, in a pretty sad state, so the inspectors came by and said it was unfit for living. There was a whole lot of us here. Most were able to pick up and go, but a few of us stayed.
Why don't you go to a workhouse?
You wouldn't be asking if you'd ever been inside one. It's wall-to-wall people, children crying, sick folk coughing all over you.
But there's plenty of that out here, too.
Well, sure, but out here, there's freedom. Nobody telling you what to do except the odd copper. Not even many of them in this neighborhood. Besides, this is my home. Just because it's missing a few walls don't mean I ought to abandon it.
You look somewhat familiar. Didn't I see you protesting outside the Harris construction yard?
Yeah, I was there. What of it?
Were you affected by the Ligeia disaster?
Well, nobody I know was killed, if that's what you mean.
So why were you protesting the construction of the Lenore?
Well, that Devons fella promised he'd buy us a meal if we stood in the crowd. And for a free meal, I'd do just about anything.
I thank you for your time.
Maybe give us a shilling or two for the trouble?
I'll consider it.